I am so excited to be here with Victoria Labalme today, the author of Risk Forward. This book is a must have for book clubs, for groups, for cohorts, for business. It is the most energizing and invigorating book that I've read in a very long time, Victoria. So thank you for putting this out into the world.
Oh gosh, it was a pleasure to do, and it's a pleasure to be with you here.
So let's talk about the title,
Yes.
Risk Forward. Tell me a little bit about, what went into this title for you?
Yeah. So the book is really about these periods in our life when we are in a phase of transition. And it could be, for 2 minutes because you're facing a blank screen and you're trying to figure out how to begin a blog post. It could be for a few weeks or a few months. And in those periods, we sometimes get scared. We think we have to have a plan and a goal. And risk forward is really about how do we go forward into that unknown, even if we don't know 100% sure where we're heading. So that is the belief behind it, the value of not knowing, to go forward. Even if you don't know, you don't have to know. And I years ago studied with the famous French mime, Marcel Marceau. I know people say, oh, you're a speaker, but you studied mime, haha. But there was this type of movement he taught us, which was to be exposed, really. It was like the sail of a boat, and how we can go forward with our heart open. And that's what I think of risking forward like. How do we go forward, heart open, into the unknown?
Oh, I love that. And it seems like perfect timing for the launch of this book. I mean, it really does. We've all been through a little bit of a stressful 2020 and into 2021 with this global pandemic and so many other things.
Yeah.
I think that, your book, when I read it, it just gave me hope,
Hmm.
humanity.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit. Were you thinking about that as you were writing it?
Yes and no. You're so perceptive. Well, part of it was, I began writing this book before the pandemic hit. And, the book process is a long one for anyone who's done one before. It's an 18 month to 2 year process. So I had a contract in 2019, and then the pandemic hit 6 months later. We were already on this risk forward track. And so to some degree, I hadn't planned it to land at this time. But what I did plan is for it to bring hope, as you said, for it to bring permission to so many people, entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives, artists who feel pressure and feel angst about their lives and their careers. And what this book is doing is really giving them that sense of possibility that you're okay, you're doing fine, and here's some ways to find your way forward.
Amazing. Amazing. Like I said, I think it's just so great and so timely that it's coming out right now. So would you talk a little bit about your own career path? I love seeing the circuitous career paths that we have all been on, but yours
Yeah.
is really interesting, and I'd love to let the audience hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I grew up in New York City, and as a kid was trying lots of different types of arts. And then as I grew up and went into college, same thing. I was still doing mime and acting and filmmaking and writing. And people are like, where are you going? Well, what's the plan? And I didn't know. And I think there are many of us who have that in our lives where we have disparate interests and people are pressuring us to figure it out. And I just kept following each of those. I didn't know what was going to happen. I ended up on television and doing commercials and on Sex and the City and on Broadway. And even still, it was all just unfolding. And then my career took an unexpected turn. We've all had this where something happens and we go in a new direction. For me, it was witnessing 9/11. And then my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And all of that happened within a 48-hour period. So my world outside my window in Manhattan was, a whole different world, seeing ground zero smoldering. And then my mother was diagnosed to die in a few months. And suddenly, like, I reevaluated my career and thought, how can I use what I have, the arts and performance skills, to help? And it turned out I got an invitation to come work with speakers and executives and presenters on their storytelling, their expression on stage and on camera. So I said, okay, I'll coach. And that led to working with organizations and teams and leaders around the world and helping them rock the room. That's the brand I have, Rock the Room. But along the way, as I was going to these conferences, I'd hear these leaders and I hear these entrepreneurs going, you got to be clear. You got to have a plan. You got to have goals. And I thought, well, that's interesting because all the top executives I worked with, whether it was Starbucks or Microsoft or entrepreneurs on Oprah's stage or on PBS, these are the people I was coaching, my clients. A lot of them would reveal how their own journey in their life or their business had evolved without always knowing exactly the next step. And I thought, this is something no one's talking about. And it's causing a lot of suffering. The fact that everyone's like, I feel like I shouldn't tell people that I'm not clear. And I thought, let's talk about the value of figuring things out. And so that's what the book is about.
Huge value in figuring things out, and huge value in, you talk a lot about, your inner circuit.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that and what that means.
Right. Well, there's a term from theater. And as a side note, I should say a lot of the principles in the book are born from the performing arts. So that's my background. So basically, I took all these concepts and I said, how do they apply to business and life, which is my work, performing arts principles to transform people's performance in business and life. And so one of the principles that I share is something called the through line, which is this driving force behind a character's behavior in a play. Now, the through line is a term coined by Stanislavski, the Russian theater artist. So when I speak and I coach, I often talk about the through line, but people would get confused and they would think of the through line as the goal or the theme or the topic. Whereas I see it, and as Stanislavski meant it, it was this linear, this ongoing driving force. And so I re-termed it the inner current, like this current that goes through a river, or the current, like you said, the circuit that goes through an electrical wire. It's that life force that rises a tree. And so I think of that as in each of our lives, like we have an inner current that pulls us forward. And we've all seen that in the things that we've done. For various reasons, we felt like I feel compelled to do this, or something is calling me forward. That's the inner current.
It is. And you and I talked earlier about that. That is the light.
Yes.
In my coaching practice, we call it the light. And so do you. And I think, it's so important for people to follow that inner current and to listen to what lights them up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's so funny because this is what we were talking about when I first looked at your website. I was like, wow, we are total sisters here, because you literally use the phrase, what lights you up. And that is one of the elements in the book. And so often, and you know this, Mary, as well, like people discount it. They think, okay, that's what I'm interested in. That makes me excited, but let me get serious, instead of going, oh, no, that is the direction. That is your hidden genius, as I call it.
Yes, absolutely. And that leads me to another thing that we both talk about that really resonated with me in the book is the purpose, someone's purpose.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you think about that, because I love it. And I think it's very different than, the world of business looks at outside.
Right. Yeah. So, there's a huge movement over the last few years where everyone's talking about purpose. What's my purpose? You got to define your purpose. And I noticed that it really freaks a lot of people out. They feel stressed, like, what's my purpose? I don't know my purpose. And they feel less than. And as I say in the book, you don't have to name your purpose to be living your purpose. Like, I had a client, so I have a risk forward group, and I take people through the course and the program of risk forward. And one woman, she was coming through this part of the book and the experience, and she said, oh my God, I realize now I don't have to know my purpose. She goes, I just have to keep doing what I'm enjoying. I've been stressing myself out, thinking I should have one core purpose. Like, I only have one purpose. Like, it's this one statement. And if everything doesn't fit into that one statement, I'm screwing up. And she's like, I just have to keep doing what I'm doing, teaching my clients. She's an executive who coaches and mentors. She goes, I just have to teach my clients and do the programs that I love, and I'll be living my purpose. I said, exactly.
Exactly. One person at a time. Or maybe, in your case, when this book is out there in the world, millions of people at a time.
Yeah, it's so funny you just said one purpose at a time, because one of my clients is Starbucks. I've done tons of programs for them, with their leadership team down to their new hires. And their mission statement, by the way, and most people don't know this, but you can look it up. It's uplifting the human spirit, one cup of coffee at a time, right? And so they're not in the coffee business. They're in the human spirit business. and they do it through coffee. And I think when we have that kind of nobility, what I call the nobility behind our work, and we can reconnect with things on a higher level, we just understand that whatever the matter at hand is, whether it's real estate or technology or, human resources, that's kind of the transactional element, but the transcendent element is really what it's truly all about.
Right. And it's almost like, one of the buzzwords now too is your why,
Yeah.
right? We've all heard that a lot, but you're talking about this very intimate why that is your inner current and is the purpose that you're living,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And it can show up in the everyday. That's the thing that I feel is so important. Because if, for example, and there's a question I won't reveal, but it's in the book, and it's a question that helps readers really reconnect with what really matters. And it's a very profound question. You know the answer instantly. And what I explain to my clients is that once you have that, you see it show up in every area of your life. It can be expressed in how you talk to the person at the grocery store, or in how you run your company, or in how you interact with your kids. And so that expression is always happening. It doesn't mean you have to have this big why. It's just how you do everything.
Yes, it's that inner current.
It's
Once
that inner
again,
current.
right? It's running through you and it comes naturally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love also you talk about the Crimson Star, which we won't define right now. We'll let everybody find out in the book what that is. But there's
Yes.
so many pieces of wisdom in this book that is so very easy to read. And I think you said you wrote it so that you can even read it out of order, right?
Yeah. So for anyone watching this, I'm going to show you what it looks like, because the book is not a typical book, as Mary can attest to. It's a visual experience. And so I would highly recommend the hardcover as opposed to the audio, because it's fun to look at, and every page is different. And each of these colored chapters represents a different chapter. And so they're page long, sometimes 2 pages long, really brief, and you can read them in any order. Because, like I say in the book, the creative process doesn't happen in a line. And your creativity, your original path forward doesn't necessarily happen always in a planned out fashion. And so this book, because of its nature, the very experience of the book is the message of the book. And I want people to do it in their own original way. Read the book in their own original way.
Yes, yes. And it, like I said in earlier, it's invigorating. I mean, it really is. And for, those of us who are working, running companies, raising kids, homeschooling still at this point, to be able to feel that sense of accomplishment of, reading a chapter and taking in the wisdom that you put in each of these chapters, it's just you almost feel a sense of accomplishment when you finish each little piece.
Oh, that's really sweet of you to say. And that was definitely part of the intent. So I'm so glad that landed with you. The idea was to make it digestible so that you can just take in a chapter, have the accomplishment of that chapter, and sit with it. And then come back to it. And it's really the kind of book that you can pick up and read a month later, and you'll see new things, because these are principles and guidelines. So when you're stuck, you can just open it up almost like the magic 8 ball, my friend said, and be like, oh, this is the lesson I need now.
Yes, yes, and it does. It feels so intuitive like that. So you talk about some myths,
Mm.
and there are quite a few that you talk about, but could you pick one that we could talk about today that really will resonate with people as they're looking to buy your book?
Yes. So, yeah, you're right. There are 5 myths. And these are the myths that I think can really screw people up and take them off course of that inner current. And so one of them is the myth of goals. And we all have this belief in society that goals are inherently good. And there's great merit to goals. I mean, goals have terrific value. I have goals, you have goals, we all have goals in different ways. But it's the goal setting process that can lead us astray if it's not done right. And goals can lead us astray if they're not chosen correctly. There is something called goal contagion, which is when we start to take on the goals of the people around us. And, you see it in teenagers who all dress the same. They've just taken on the goal of the attire of their friends. And you'll see 6 girls walking down the street and they all have long hair and white sneakers and shorts and like a white t-shirt rolled up. And that's that look. And you see it in executives in the insurance industry where all the men want to have the same thing. It's the fancy gold watch and a certain kind of hair and then the toys like the yacht and the golf club membership. So they're all kind of doing the same thing. But the question for each of us becomes, is that goal really what you want?
Right.
And that's where it can lead us astray if we're not careful.
Right. Once again, listening to your inner current, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep going back to that because I love it so much. I mean,
I'm
I
so
really
glad.
do. But it's interesting. So this year, I think that the point about goals, people are picking their heads up and we're getting vaccinated and people, we feel like the world is opening up again. And there are so many people who are down on themselves because they didn't feel like they accomplished anything this year. And I think that kind of goes along with that myth of goals, right? But could you maybe give some advice to people that, maybe set goals and it didn't turn out the way they thought it would at the end of this year?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad you're talking about this because there was a lot of judgment happening over the past year about how people were spending the pandemic. And I would see these posts go up on social media and they'd say things like, are you just hanging out at home watching Netflix or are you really accomplishing your goals? And I thought, who's to say that watching Netflix isn't the right thing to do? Because, maybe somewhere intuitively or in the back of your mind, A, you need to rest. It's like lying fallow, with a field that then regroups itself and refertilizes for the next crop. It could be that somewhere in the back of your mind, you're processing something, your intuition is telling you to watch such and such a program. It could be that you need that downtime. You need to reevaluate your life. So there's no judgment here. And it's often, I'm sure everyone watching or listening to this can attest to the fact that there are times in your life where you thought you were doing something that was, quote, off the path or, quote, useless. And it turned out to be the most important sort of groundwork for whatever was coming next. And you thought it was just a little side trip. And that's really important to pay attention to not really judge ourselves or really other people. So we all have plans and goals at times. And as you said, this last year taught us that, best laid plans, not always going to happen. But I think it's something to keep in mind always, because even though the pandemic has taught us that there's a little bit of instability going on in the world, the truth is it's always been there. It's just been more apparent. There's no guarantee we'll have our job, our health, our career, our economy. Any of that could go at any moment for all kinds of reasons. So I think if nothing else, this pandemic has woken us up to the immediacy and the value. And that's why, by the way, I think it's so important to risk forward, like go into the unknown. If not now, when?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all entered the unknown and are, continuing on with stronger characters and hopefully stronger immune systems for
Yeah.
those of us who were, lucky enough to stay healthy through all of this. But I think that going back to, giving people permission to watch Netflix
Yeah.
is going to resonate with a lot of people, Victoria, for sure.
Well, I really mean it. I'll tell you, interestingly enough, there was a time when I was working on this book and it was late at night and I, had a lot to do. This was about half a year, 3/4 of a year ago. And I got onto Instagram, which I'm not on often. And because it's just not where my head is normally. But I, for some reason, was compelled to go on there and I started scrolling through and I came across, for reasons I don't know, the feeder system gave me this. It was a video of this woman, Akira Armstrong, who was just an extraordinary, full-figured woman just dancing. And I have a background in dance. So I was just riveted by her movements and her excellence of line. And we ended up becoming friends. And she's in the book now. And she's the perfect example of what I was actually looking for to put in the book.
Yeah.
There's a whole chapter that is about how we take what seems like a liability and turn it into an asset. And she's the perfect example of that. Who would have thought, right? Or another client of mine, she does a lot of work in coaching entrepreneurs. But then she had this idea to kind of go off into the bush. She's in South Africa. And she's like, Victoria, I just need your help to risk forward and not do something right now. Because everyone's telling me to, like, crank it up and make more money and redo this program and, rinse and repeat. And she's like, I'm exhausted. Of course I could make more money, but I am so freaking tired, Victoria. I just want to break. I want to be able to risk forward. And she said, I don't want to betray myself anymore.
Oh,
Right? It's such a great line. I just want to honor myself. And I said, yes. So we talked and I coached her through it. And she took like a month off into the South African bush. She came back with all these new ideas for her business, and this refreshed capability. And she just crushed it on her next, she does launches online. And it was so much healthier, her business, her mindset. And so, these little windows where we break, or these windows where we try something different than we've done before, are so important.
yeah, that's huge. And I think it goes back to, something else that we talked about. When 2020 hit and the world shut down, we with our clients said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is say, how can I help? Which you also write about in the book. I mean, we are kindred spirits for sure. I can't even, how can I help? And then we said, you know what, let's just give each other and give all of our clients grace. And that grace is almost like, to me, that hall pass that you're talking about that you gave your client, just go take a break.
Yeah,
Clear your mind, because when you come back, you're going to be even better.
exactly. Completely. And there's another angle on that too, which another client of mine experienced. And I'll give this example because I hope it will resonate. There's an early part of the book where I talk about 4 questions to ask yourself. And it goes back to one of them being, what lights you up, like this. But she went through that and she realized this project that she was about to commit to with her whole team, and it was this sort of, I won't go into the details of it, but just, it was a big undertaking. And on the outside, it got a lot of praise from people like, oh, that's so impressive that you're going to do that. And boy, you're going to do really well financially with that. And it's such a cool, innovative angle to your business. And so she got all that outside praise and props. But as she got into it and as she went through this book, she's like, I don't want to do this. I actually feel dread. And then she had that schism, that kind of disconnect between all the praise from the outside and like how she felt on the inside. It's like Jerry Seinfeld has this joke. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, when you're engaged and getting married to the wrong person, he said, it's like going up a roller coaster hill, tick, 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 tick. And you're about to go over that first hump and you're like, I don't want to. Right. She's like, right. And she was having that feeling.
Oof.
And she had the courage to actually stop and say, this is not the right move. And she stopped the project. Her team actually then came out of the closet and said, yeah, we were actually a little worried, and she saved a ton of time, a ton of money, a ton of stress, and opportunity costs. In her estimate, it was about $1 million save.
Wow.
Right? So trust that feeling when you have that, I don't know, instead of having that kind of got to push through it, which our society loves, go through it. Like, take a moment to say, maybe I should pay attention to that feeling.
Yes. So you're giving your clients permission to follow their hearts and follow what's calling to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Giving them permission to follow their hearts, what's calling to them, and what's right for them. Because in that what's right for you, the listener, the reader, that's where the hidden genius is. And that's ultimately what we all want, is to be fully expressed and do things that will light us up and be giving and supportive to the people and community around us. And that's how you find it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that Howard Thurman quote, don't follow, what you think the world wants you to be. And I'm totally butchering that, but, follow what lights you up, because the world needs more people
Yes.
who are lit up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about detours.
Yeah. Well, as I say in the book, a detour is only a detour if you see it as a detour. And we can do a lot of self-harm by punishing ourselves for the detours that we seemingly take. And oftentimes those can be there for a reason, a bit like the Netflix example. So detours are there for a reason at times. We can always learn from them. And I've had clients who have come to me and they've been known for one particular part of their business, but they kind of want to take a detour, but they're afraid to take a detour. What will people think? Or I don't have expertise in this area, or I'm not really sure where it's going to lead or how I'm going to make money at it, but it's calling to me. Those are worth paying attention to because they end up leading back to the main current. If you think of that main river and then you have a tributary and it comes back, and it's a very powerful return because it comes back with a whole new force. I have many, many examples in my life where I've done that, and it's extraordinary. And I have client examples where they've done that, and it's extraordinary.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's just, I love hearing about people's stories about how they get to where they are today because there are those tributaries and those little forks in the road that lead them to exactly where they need to be.
Yes. And often for reasons that we couldn't have thought. A friend of mine, when I was an actor in New York City, he had a fairly successful acting career, but he wanted to, for whatever reason, take the detour and start playing piano again. And people, like his agent, were a little freaked out. Like, you really shouldn't take time off right now and just focus on piano. But he was into it. And he got a piano. He moved it into his apartment. He started playing all the time. He was obsessed. And then a few months later, his agent said, "You won't believe it. I just got a script. They are looking for an actor who can play piano at a high level. It's a show called Two Pianos, Four Hands." And he got the lead. So go figure. And sometimes the benefits are not that direct or that immediate, but they are there. And I always tell people one of three things will happen when you risk forward, and they're all good because people say, well, what if it doesn't work out? So here are the three outcomes. Number one, it does work out. It leads to something great. Number two, it doesn't work out exactly, but it shows you the next step. And number three, you won't die regretting that you never gave it a shot. And the number one regret of the dying in all the studies that are out there is that they didn't take more creative risks.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the time.
This is the time. This is the time to risk forward.
This is the time to risk forward.
I see this just, oh my gosh, I can't wait to share this with our audience. I can't wait to share this with my clients, with my family and with my everybody. I mean, it's just wonderful. It's wonderful.
I love that you're saying that. I just have to jump in because, here's an interesting topic back to what we were just talking about, sort of the goal. When I was first writing this book, and anyone who's written a book or done a business, people say, who's your target market, right? And that's a famous question, like who's your avatar? Who's the ideal client? And I kept saying it's really anyone who's going through a transition. It could be a college student coming out of college, facing the unknown. It could be someone going through a divorce or a health crisis. It could be an executive leading their team into new territory, entrepreneur inventing their business. It could be an artist trying to figure out their way. Guess what? That's who's getting the book. I have an 81-year-old famous comedian who said, this is the perfect book for me right now. My assistant who's 23 said, every college grad should read this book. People going through divorce. So all of this is to say, I think when you come from the soul and you truly are trying to help people, it goes across genders, populations, categories of humans. It speaks to the general human spirit.
Yeah, I truly believe that. So how can people get your book?
They can go to riskforward.com/book. And the reason I say that site, you can certainly get it on any main bookseller site. If you come through our site, you will see there is a special extra goodies there. So even if you go to any other site first, come back to that page I just gave you, riskforward.com/book, because there we have special things for people who buy the book. And we have special things for people who buy 3 books or 10 books. So you'll see that on that page. We're building a community, and we'd love for anyone here to be a part of it.
Great. Well, sign me up, Victoria.
Thank you, Mary.
That's great. So anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to share right now?
Well, I guess 2 final things. I just want to reiterate that the book is like an experience. So for anyone who's felt that we've been holding back, it's really because it's like a movie in the sense that you don't want to blow the surprises. And there's some cool surprises in the book that people go through it and they have this emotional experience. It's profound. And so to talk too much about it would take it away. We want you to have the benefit of that experience. So when you get the book, to tell other people to get it, but don't tell them the whole thing, because again, it's like a movie. We want people to have that fresh experience. That's important to me, just because it's fun, right? Number one. Number two, I want to reiterate this point that at the edge of not knowing, if you're ever in a place of not knowing, whether again it's a blank page or a blank year, that is the beginning of the extraordinary. So rock on and risk forward.
Oh, I love that. Risk forward. It's the beginning of the extraordinary.